What were your first thoughts about moving into insurance?
I mean, the perception of insurance is that it's slow, that it doesn't want to change, that it's full of men in grey suits. I see insurance as well playing a large force for good. Stop with the jargon. It's particularly intimidating, I think, for people as an industry trying to become more customer-centric and help people understand what they're paying for.
As well, I was about to use an acronym then, and I thought I'll stop myself.
Don't do that.
Yeah. What is your biggest pet peeve?
It's like that elephant in the room that you can't get on top of.
What's your worst mistake? How did you overcome it?
Probably.
To ease us in, I'm just going to ask you a few icebreaker questions, a little bit about you to get to know you as a person before we delve into the insurance side of things. Firstly, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to work for the United Nations, which sounds very, very highfalutin. Most people want to be a fireman or a nurse or something, but I suppose got that kind of inspiration from my father. So he worked with the UN at different times and didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with the UN, but the UN was kind of high on my aspirations.
Yeah, so just no idea where you wanted to work.
No.
Just you saw that in your dad and thought that kind of seems quite good. Yeah. What were you up to when you were 18? What were you doing then?
When I was 18, so because my dad did work for the UN, we lived in a few different countries, which I think has really impacted me actually as an individual. And so I finished school. I did my A-levels when I was 16. So when I was 18, I was 2 years through my university degree, and I was doing my Erasmus year in Granada in Spain. So quite a nice year.
Yeah, sounds high flying from the get-go.
Well, I'm not sure high flying. Living as a student in Spain, I think my weekly allowance was about £40 a week, but I'm probably showing my age. Saying that you could live on that.
Yeah, that sounds good. How would your friends describe you?
They probably describe me as quite curious, but also determined. So I do like to challenge the status quo from time to time, which might come as a surprise actually to most people if they think about the insurance world. But yeah, curious. And I think a friend of mine, we did one of these exercises when you find out about each other, and she said my word was wonder. So yeah.
That's really nice. I think that ties in quite well. It's probably quite a good quality in your role and in insurance in general to be curious and challenging for things as well. What is your biggest pet peeve?
Passive aggressiveness. I just, as a trait in people, as a trait that you see in business, I just really struggle with it. I don't struggle with people having problems with anything because, we all do in our personal or our professional lives. But when people are passive aggressive and just not able to either own their issue or own the problem, I really, really struggle with that.
Yeah. Where do you think that has come from? Do you think you've...
I don't know. I think it's just I quite like authenticity in people and openness, and I think it's really, really hard to work if people are in the grey all the time. And passive aggressiveness is one of those traits where it's not black, it's not white, and so you can't respond to it. It's just grey and kind of quite overpowering in teams, and not good for the work environment.
And most of the time, everyone knows exactly what's happening, but no one can address it because the person hasn't addressed it themselves. So it's
like that elephant in the room that you can't get on top of. So that pet peeve.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think to start off, you've touched already on having grown up in different countries, and I know that you moved around, and then you were obviously in Granada in Spain when you were 18, and I think you moved around with your career as well. So what was your early life? What were your parents like? How did you grow up, and what were you interested in?
I was quite sporty. Done a lot of water sports all my life, skiing. So I'm quite an active person. My parents are quite active. As I said, my father worked with the United Nations, but he was actually an army officer. So I suppose quite structured in his approach. My mother was in the medical profession, so she I was quite an outgoing person, and actually, if I think about her, she was aeromedding around the world in her younger career. She dared to be different, and I think it's something that really is rubbed off on me, actually. And I think as females, it's really good to have some sort of role model, be it one of your parents or be it someone that you look up to.
Absolutely. Have you found any other kind of female role models as you've gone through your career that have stood out for you?
Yeah. I suppose one of my, what do you call it, a girly crush, is Christine Lagarde. I just think she is wonderful. So, French, so she's got that, je ne sais quoi. First finance minister, and led France in France and led France through the global crisis back in sort of 2007, and currently president of the ECB. And she just comes across as so poised, so polished, but, very human.
Yeah.
I just think she's amazing.
And that's the thing, especially with women, I think you want to be a good businesswoman, but also be a woman and have that kind of, poise or class or humanity to you, which often it seems like you have to choose between the two. Yeah. But it's good. There's a lot of women in business that achieve both of those things. Yeah. So your early days. So you said you did your A-levels when you were 16, which is amazing, and so you're off to university at 16 or 18? Yeah. What did you study at university?
I did politics with French and Spanish, so hence the Erasmus year in Spain, because that was my primary. And then, after university, because I graduated at 20, didn't quite have an appetite for a proper job at that stage. So went off and did 2 ski seasons, which was amazing, because again, it's a passion of mine. Lived in the States for a year, and then I went back and did a master's in marketing management. So,
Great. What made you decide to do marketing management? What were you...
I don't know, it just kind of came to me. I suppose, the original degree, politics with the languages, I've always loved languages, but the politics thing was probably that hangover of thinking I was going to work for the UN. Yeah. But as you progress and as you mature a little bit, I didn't think I wanted to work in politics. No. I didn't think I wanted to work for the UN. I wanted to do something a little bit more dynamic, and I think that's what you get in a business sort of profession.
Absolutely, and the creativity side of it as well, I think, comes into it a bit. Yeah. Do you think, though, your politics degree has had any impact on you now, either as a person or in the way that you do things?
Not particularly.
You're quite young, I suppose.
I was quite young, yeah. And I mean, arguably, you're sort of learning by rote.
Yeah,
a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Probably helps with. Any university degree does with, public speaking or presenting and stuff like that. It's just confidence. It's confidence in any subject. I kind of think for undergraduates, it doesn't matter what you study, but it's the rigor around it. Really. Yeah.
I suppose the ski seasons as well would have helped that confidence build, because you definitely have to be. Well, it's dropping you in the deep end, meeting people, living abroad, all of those things. Yeah. Do you still ski?
I do still ski, yes. And to your point around the ski seasons, had to do an avalanche evacuation in one of my ski seasons, which was amazing. It was an avalanche coming down the mountain. I had to move 80 people, and I was 20 or 21 or something. So
you've probably hypothetically done that since in various roles, trying to move everyone out the way of an avalanche in some way, which is good. So where you did your master's in marketing management, and where did it take you? Where did you go next?
So decided then I probably should get a proper job. I think I was nearly 24 at that stage, and I went to work in FMCG. So my first proper job was with Procter & Gamble in Weybridge. So that's when I came to the UK first. And I was there for a few years. Amazing company, but probably a little bit too structured for me. Because that whole daring to be different kind of is me, and that they've got billion-dollar brands that they need to protect. So was then attracted to the travel industry, where I stayed for about 11 years, and it was a very interesting time in the travel industry, in that it was a time of aggregation. So things like Expedia, Last Minute, etc. popped up, digitization, and also that whole piece around sort of customer is king. So TripAdvisor popped up at the same time. So the actual whole industry went through an enormous amount of change, which of course I was loving. And I worked for a global company, so I had the opportunity to work on some global roles, but also spend a year in Australia, in Melbourne, which was fantastic.
Oh, wonderful.
So, yeah.
That's so you kept the travelling up as well. I think
Yeah.
we haven't mentioned, but you grew up in Ireland,
Yes,
and then
yeah.
so you'd come over to the UK, and
Yeah.
then had been moving around
Yeah.
with roles since then.
Yeah.
Were you in marketing roles?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So mainly data and CRM roles,
Yeah.
and a bit of digital towards the end, and yeah, did a whole project around digitization of the whole process.
Okay.
So yeah, it was an interesting time.
That's a great
Yeah.
thing. What is there anything that you look back on fondly of those kind of early days in your career, or would have done differently?
Would have done differently. No, I must say one of our conferences was the Howden ski resort. So if I was going to think fondly, so you didn't really.
Yeah.
But I mean, I suppose career-wise, there was just I worked with some great people, you know,
Yeah.
and I think it's people that make the difference. So I have some great memories, and I always say I grew up in that company, so I was there for 11 years,
Yeah.
and it was fantastic. Yeah.
It's always people as well that really
Yeah.
create a culture too,
Yeah.
and yeah, that makes so. Then is that when, after being there for 11 years, working in the travel industry, living in Melbourne, is that where your insurance-related career starts?
Yeah, that's when the insurance trajectory started. So I guess 10 years this year.
Yeah.
First went into insurance in 2013. An opportunity arose at AXA in the UK, and it was around direct and retail partnerships. So I guess what was happening in the insurance industry had happened to the travel industry. That thing about, you know, customer is king, aggregation. So aggregators have been huge in the UK for a long time. And even, you know, who would have thought customer reviews? I mean, it just didn't happen in the insurance industry. So I was working in a retail aspect of AXA. I had a great boss who wanted things to change. And it was great to be able to use my skill set from a different industry in the insurance industry. So, yeah.
So when you were first either looking for a job or offered the job, what were your first thoughts about moving from travel into insurance?
I mean, the perception of insurance is that it's slow, that it
Yeah.
doesn't want to change, that it's full of men in grey suits. And, you know, I was talking to, because, you know, a sort of 11-year tenure in one company, I thought, well, you know, I don't want to go abroad again. So what else can I do? So I've been talking to some headhunters, and they said, have a discussion with this guy. And I just really liked the person. I think, you know, you can do as much research about a company, and you should, obviously, but it's around the person. And I met as the chap that I said was a great boss, and I just thought he wants to change. He wants to do things differently, and yeah, so I was attracted in.
Again, it's always the people that kind of keep you in something and make it better, which is good. So, in those, do you think those myths around insurance that you kind of had in your head beforehand? Are there others? Have those been squashed for you? Or are there any other myths that exist?
I mean, I think, as I said, 10 years. I've seen insurance change quite radically, probably in that period. It's always been data based, but I suppose the data that was used and the modelling that was used was largely actuarial. And even during my time at AXA, it was marrying up customer data with actuarial data. So less predicting the future by only looking at the past, but actually predicting the future, which, you know, you have to do in insurance, based on customer indicators as well. So really a sort of a modern adaptation of actuarial science. I see insurance as well playing a large force for good, and it's something that David Howden, who is the ultimate owner, I suppose, of Endsleigh, as part of the Howden Group, he talks about, you know, insurance being a force for good, and be it the ESG credentials, be it some of the stuff that insurance enables in the world, it really has started to change, I think. More of an outside-in look.
I think as well there is more creativity in the business than people realise. There's a lot more creatives working within it in roles, but also how it can be a force for good, and how you can be creative with insurance and working with people as well. So I agree. Where do you think, so you talked about the past 10 years, how much it's changed. Where do you see things going? What do you see happening in the future in insurance?
I think it will increasingly become personalised and more automated. In the 10 years I've worked in insurance, people have always talked about making it easy. I don't think insurance is yet easy, either for the common man on the street or for businesses to navigate, but I think there's an awful lot of focus on that now. People understand that the clients have choices, and that they actually need to respond to that. So to make it easy, and then, you talk about automation and people think, oh, robotics, but actually the automation and everything being based in data will make it more personalised for people's insurance needs, which are wider than just the one product that they might buy. More about ensuring the person or the business as opposed to just the one product need.
Yeah, that makes sense. When you were, so obviously you're at Endsleigh now, CEO at Endsleigh. What was your role at your previous? You've been in one previous place, weren't you, before insurance?
So two different insurers actually before Endsleigh. So until this role, I've always worked in different marketing roles. So prior to this, I was with Cigna, which is healthcare, a big US health insurance company, but I was on the international market side. So looking after a number of accounts across different territories, including Africa and the IGO-NGO space, which somehow I managed to work with the UN because one of our clients was the United Nations. So I was CMO there, so Chief Marketing Officer, and then AXA, different titles, the same thing, kind of, leading up the marketing customer functions.
I'm sure a lot of people that are listening might be thinking about a marketing role and then potentially not have considered something around insurance as a marketeer for a long time. What do you think makes it different working in marketing within insurance roles versus your previous roles?
I suppose previous roles started out, as I said, FMCG, huge big brands that you need to maintain the brand. Yes, innovation around customer, but really, really focused on the brand. Travel, margins are thin, so you just don't have the money to play with. And insurance, it's not fat cat stuff, but there is an investment in having the right marketing, but to make it a lot more relevant to the customer. So there's a lot around digitization. So again, if people are thinking about careers in digital, very data driven, and I think marketing is more of a data driven science nowadays. So again, there's plenty of data in insurance. It is actually a good place to have a marketing career, and there's good progression as well. So you've got large companies, you've got small companies. There's different options really.
Yeah. Have you had any challenges or issues that have come up either in role because of it being insurance, potentially being a woman in your career in insurance that you could talk a little bit about potentially?
I certainly have never felt intimidated being a woman in insurance. There are a surprising number of, maybe not enough, but there are a surprising number of women in senior roles in insurance. And within the Howden group, which Endsleigh is part of, there's an awful lot of senior females actually, and not just senior, but through the organisation. So I do think that it's more gender diversified than people would. Again, it's probably a conception about the insurance industry that it's not diversified, but there are a lot of female employees.
That's good to hear. If you were the only one, I'd be a bit worried for everybody. A question that I was thinking around people in insurance, what should everyone that works in insurance either stop or start doing more of?
Stop with the jargon. I mean, it's not just insurance that's guilty of this. Be it banking, be it FMCG, whatever. Everyone in every industry gets sucked into their industry, but insurance, because people don't really understand it, is particularly intimidating, I think, for people as we as an industry try to become more customer centric and help people understand what they're paying for, because it's quite an ephemeral concept. It's you're paying against risk of future catastrophe, really. Stop with the jargon, start talking in plain language, especially policy documents, because if I'm honest, they confuse me. And start telling their stories. I think as an industry, people, it's getting better, but people have been shy about telling their stories, even if it's been insurance all their lives. Their careers have probably changed quite dramatically as the industry's changed, and so just more humanism, more people talking about what they do and how to get into the industry. Yeah,
I agree. I suppose also that humanism with the stories of the people that have been supported through what we do in insurance, because I think they are stories, they are real people that have had really serious impacts that insurance has helped to minimise. So storytelling and humanising, I think everyone can agree is a good thing, and definitely stopping with the jargon.
Yes.
It's incredibly difficult. Do you have any advice for anyone that's looking to start out in insurance about what they can find out?
I would say don't limit your thinking about what is possible. An insurance company is the same as any other company, so it will have finance roles, it will have data roles, it will have marketing roles, so anything you're specializing in, there's probably a role. An awful lot of companies, including Endsleigh, does do student placements, be that out of university or be it just or be it interns that come into the company and learn on the job. So don't limit your thinking about there's only one way in, there's only one option once you're in there. Think about, get in contact with insurance companies, find out. A lot of the websites are really good about attracting people and helping them understand how to get in. Just don't limit your thinking and think about alternate ways to get in rather than you have to be an actuary, you have to have studied maths. Just not true.
I think something, especially as a marketeer, you can work in marketing and work in insurance. You can choose a role, you can choose the industry, and there's a variety of roles within it, which I think is important for people to realise, and growing as well. More digitisation, more around corporate social responsibility as well. I was about to use an acronym then, and I thought I'll stop myself.
Don't do that.
I think it would be great as well. We talked a little bit about the insurance industry, but talking about your role. So I think heading up an insurance brokerage. What did you find the most difficult when you came into the role as a CEO? What's been the most challenging change?
Other than starting in June 2020 when we were in lockdown, which was quite a challenge, new role, new type of role, and then no one there. So I guess looking across everything, but also just adapting to the fact. So someone's asked me, I've been sort of tutoring someone in my team who was thinking about developing into a CEO. And the question was, well, how do you know everything? And I said, well, if I knew everything, I couldn't do my job. So actually, an awful lot of the job is getting the right people around you with the right skill sets to deliver on the chosen strategy, and then empowering them to do their job. So that means, yes, sometimes I wake up on a Saturday morning and go, oh God, how about that thing? But, having trust in your people, empowering people, and then trusting that they're going to get it done. So that's probably been, and across so much, across, finance, across, not just marketing, which is obviously a comfort zone for myself, but across the whole piece. But being surrounded by great people, it's a great culture at Endsleigh, so I've been quite lucky.
That's good. And it's small enough that you can know most people that are here. And I like that about delegate. If you don't know something, get someone in the role that does know it. People should know more than you do about their specific bits. You talked a bit about company culture at Endsleigh. What do you think makes a great company culture?
I think that piece about empowerment, and then the flip side of an empowered workforce is that they feel accountable, and there's and these are all sort of jargony words, but the accountability piece for me, it's around this pride in the company and this pride in what people are doing. So every single person in the company has got something to deliver, which they should feel personally proud to deliver, which then sort of aggregates up, because no one person can do everything. So I kind of think, recognising, rewarding people is really important, so that people do feel that sense of pride, and a very clear strategy. Because if people don't know where they're going, you get lost.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
It's communication part of it. I agree.
Mm.
And you mentioned as well, as part of talking to someone in your team that was thinking about being a CEO, have you ever had a mentor? Has anyone ever mentored you?
Yeah, I had a great mentor, and it was a person who's probably 20 years my senior, a man in the travel industry, and he was just wise.
Yeah.
So, there were certain things that, and continued to mentor me unofficially, even after I left the travel industry. But I could just go to him with things, and he'd kind of done it and seen it. And I think a good mentor-mentee relationship, you trust each other and you respect each other. And there was that. So, yeah, I still know that person to this day.
I mean, that sounds... How do you go about finding a mentor? Do you, if there isn't an official channel?
No, and I think mentor-mentee relationships can form for different reasons. I suppose with him, it was more about career and development and choices that I might be making. But another mentor I had was he was the financial controller at the time, because I guess in my mind I was doing a marketing role at that stage, and I thought, somewhere in my mind, I thought I would love to lead a business at some point. But I had seen business leaders, and I think it's very interesting actually, at either a junior or a mid-level in your career, you see things happening, and they might be people, which in my instance, this is the story, seeing business leaders use financial jargon, but in the wrong way, and they just look a little bit silly. So I got a financial controller as my mentor, but it was very specific. I wanted to understand the role of finance. I wanted to understand how finance worked, because it's not maths. Yeah. We think we understand it, but it's so not. So that was very time bound. He was my mentor for about 3 months, and we worked through specific things. But I think to make good relationship work, you should meet up, you should discuss what you as the mentee want, and can the mentor answer to that, and then agree how you're going to do it. Yeah. And is there a bit of chemistry? Because people are very different. If you can't get on with the person, because it shouldn't be so structured that it feels like being at school. There has to be an element of fun to be about it.
Yeah, you need to trust them as well, and have kind of fun with it. Do it sounds like did you seek that out, or did someone advise you to do that? Yeah. And I think that's a great kind of thing to look at, if you see a role that you could imagine doing in the future, looking at what they are doing right and what they're doing wrong, and then looking at where you are and what gaps you need to fill. How would you have any advice for someone that thinks, right, I want to get into X kind of role, but I don't have these skill sets, or I don't have this confidence? What kind of ways could you get a mentor, or shadow someone, or other things?
If they're already in the business,
or outside of it, are there any resources that someone could look to potentially?
I think LinkedIn is always quite a good resource, because you might think, well, I couldn't possibly do that job, but actually you could find someone with similar jobs and have a look at what their career path was. So I read a thing actually on LinkedIn recently, and it said, and this is probably a little bit sexist the other way, but it said men will apply for a job with 10% of the credentials, whereas women won't even apply for it if they don't have 90% of the credentials. So sometimes it's take a chance, because you might not think you've got everything that you require for the job or the application, but it's about interpreting what the requirements are. So if I was to give an example, let's say you're applying for a marketing role, but you'd worked in a different type of role, but maybe done something around communications. In your application, it's just about bringing forward, that actually you have done some communications with people, or using your examples from school or from college or from university, because you do a lot actually when you're in education that can be brought into the workplace. So just think carefully about what you do have and not focus on what you don't have. I really
like that, because I think especially with women, that you just see an amount of words and look at which ones you match up with, instead of thinking outside of the box about your personal life when you've had examples of exhibiting certain skills.
Look, and I think as well, for women coming back into the workforce after having children, again, certain an awful lot of companies now will look at that and say, well, actually, there's a lot of prioritisation and a lot of other skill sets they would have used just to get through that first bit of craziness.
And they have been working, just domestic work, which is potentially, harder in some ways. So yeah, managing a team of children is probably a little bit more chaotic than a team at Endsleigh. I think at the moment, in your role at the moment, what's your favourite part of your job? And what's your least favourite? But we'll start with favourite.
Favourite. Dealing with people. I mean, I love interacting with the employees, with our partners, with clients, and as much as my client-facing staff will allow me to meet with clients, I keep asking to go out on client visits.
They're too scared, probably.
But you know, that's really, really insightful. And actually taking the time, I recently did a whole series of sort of skip level meetings with people who aren't my direct reports, but who work in the business. And I think that's it's super important to actually hear what is going on in the business, because sometimes when you're in a position of leadership, people tell you what they think you want to hear as opposed to what's really going on. And I have actually seen that going very wrong for someone in my career. You know, the person lost touch with the business and the business failed, you know, so things like that can happen. So to me, listening to the employees, client interaction, I love when I'm allowed to go out and see a client, because what you actually hear in an hour's meeting, you know, it's really valuable. So yeah, I really enjoy that.
It sounds, I'm actually interested because you mentioned around, you know, some people telling you what you want to hear. Is that something that happens with seniority, and have you ever felt like have you ever felt the impact of that, of feeling that you're not really understanding? You said that it's gone wrong for someone before that you're aware of, but you've done the skip level feedback, but it sounds like it's a need to have a company culture that's super open. Because otherwise, you could be really out. I've seen it happen as well with CEOs before that just had no idea.
No, and I mean, I'm a great fan of not closing yourself up in an office. There are times when you have to have confidential, you know, discussions on the phone, but jump into a meeting room. I sit out on the floor and I actually like it. You know, the things you overhear, you know, going to a shared kitchen, you know, again, I've worked with people who don't make themselves their own cup of tea. And I kind of think it's really important to just hear things. And our company culture is such that sometimes they don't care that I'm there. They're still talking about stuff and I'm like, oh, really? But, you know, it's great. And so people really is my kind of favourite thing about the job.
I completely agree. It makes a company and the people that you work with, clients as well. It's the same sort of thing that it makes massive impact. What's your least favourite?
My least favourite thing, probably the admin. You know, the sort of the stuff that needs to be done. That I kind of, you know, you need to do it as a director of a company, but you know, does it add a tremendous amount of value? I suppose it keeps us safe, it keeps us resilient, but you know, I'd rather be creating value.
Do you think that's insurance specific or just role? Everywhere would have that same issue. And do you what I was actually thinking about what a typical day would look like for you, because I see you in the office and you know you're very present, but what would a typical day be?
It really depends. Tend to have quite a lot of meetings, as everyone does. We've just got a meeting culture, don't we? I tried to be quite rigorous with myself, though. Do I really need to be there? So we've recently gone through quite a lot of change. That was very intense in the meeting front to make sure that everything went through in the right way. But increasingly, as we're going into sort of growing the company and trading in the company, I take a bit of a step back. But yeah, meetings with you know, people, with partners. So obviously, as an insurance broker, we need to have close relationships with our insurer partners. But yeah, I tried to keep a bit free, tried to keep my lunch break booked out for half an hour, just in case I want a bit of fresh air. But yeah, I don't like, you know, back-to-back meetings. I just don't think it's tremendously productive. But I do try and maximise my time in the office to try and get people, because we work hybrid here. I don't personally adhere to the 2-3, but you know, I think that's just being flexible. I prefer to be in sort of 3 or 4 days, just because I like to see human beings rather than just being stuck on Teams calls.
Absolutely.
As we have all been for the last few years.
And it makes you more of a physical presence for everyone as well.
Yeah.
And leading by example, I think, is a massive part of it.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself, you mentioned the kind of things that you'd be working on, do you find yourself solely on one type of project that's, you know, to do with Howden or to do with Endsleigh as a business? Are there any projects that you wish you could be doing more of? You mentioned wanting to see clients more, which I think is valid. Yeah. But if you could do any other role in Endsleigh if you weren't CEO, what would you think you would want to be doing?
I suppose I do genuinely appreciate the variety of my role. So, you know, I say there's meetings, but I mean, the type of meetings are very different. So, you know, being part of the CSR committee is something new for me. So someone's recently left, so I've taken that on, and really delighted to be part of that. Seeing more clients would be great. And then for more strategic projects, as we're starting to get them off the ground, I will take sort of a leadership role and sponsor the project. So actually getting into what we're doing as a business to help grow our business. And to me, that feels very real, as opposed to just always living in PowerPoints and reports and whatever. And as we explore the world of Howden, we're relatively new to that group, meeting some of my colleagues there and seeing how they can add value to the Endsleigh business is something that I really appreciate as well, because it's them putting people in contact, and the kind of relationships I've seen between Endsleigh people and Howden people are just fantastic. You know, it's true value creation for the business, but really solving clients' needs as well, where their insurance needs are more diverse than Endsleigh can service. But as a group, we can really give an enhanced client experience.
I think that the power of more people and more knowledge, experience, kind of specialities is a good thing to have for Endsleigh as well. What's the kind of biggest challenge you're facing at the moment? And what are you kind of doing to work on that?
Probably one of the things that people may not think about with the cost of living and inflationary market that we're in at the moment is the cost of claims. They are going up, and obviously with that, as a broker, we're very mindful of cost of insurance for our clients, but we also have to work with insurers, and insurers' appetite for higher risk, and this sounds a little bit jargony, but higher risk insurance either decreases or it becomes more expensive. So I suppose for us it's trying to balance client affordability, so can they afford to buy the insurance, with the commercial needs of an insurer. So, you know, it's tricky, because if there is a claim in, you know, if I was to say a large school, for example, that's a lot of money, and the cost of repair, the cost of materials, everything has gone up. But actual, revenue into, again, example of a school, hasn't particularly gone up. So, just trying to work with clients and our insurance providers it's tricky for everyone in the industry at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing to point out, is that it's everyone's struggling in different ways. So you're also managing your client and the care for the school in that example, and the insurer, and us as a business, or Endsleigh as a business, so that you're trying to balance all of those things, which is hopefully will ease up over time. But it seems it's a lot at the moment. You might not have one, which I wouldn't put it past you, but have you ever made a mistake, especially in your insurance career? What's your worst mistake, and how did you overcome it?
Probably my worst mistake was actually when I was in the travel industry. Was again, I'll show my age with this one. I was doing marketing, and we did a direct mail piece out to our clients, and I was responsible for signing off, and it was the wrong phone number.
Oh no!
So we did have a website, and we did have emails, but it was the wrong phone number. But I suppose. It was a bit of a disaster. I was actually at home with the flu at that day, and I got a phone call going, it was the wrong phone number on the DM piece. And I thought, oh, Christ, what do I do? I said, I shouldn't swear, but anyway. But I owned it, and I worked with my IT colleagues. We actually went and bought a phone number, because you could do that in those days. It was one of those 0800 numbers, whatever. But it was just one of those, like, you'd sent out 50,000 pieces. It cost a fortune, and actually the business wasn't going to get any value from it, but I was ill as well. You couldn't have made it up.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think as well, the things like that will always stay with you, even if it had been way smaller. And compared to what you're now responsible for, I think it's pretty minor, but you'll never forget it. The feeling of dread.
No. Yeah.
I think everyone has it at some point. And it's good to know that you're not exempt from that feeling at any point. I think as well, we've spoken a lot about you and your career, but are there any other brands that you really look to that are doing things right that you think fondly of?
I've always been a big fan of British Airways. I use them quite a bit. And
new uniform.
The new uniform, I know. And they constantly, they kind of, I suppose they're a bit like insurance because they hold that tag of being a little bit fuddy-duddy. Because some people think BA is really fuddy-duddy, but I just think they're brilliant at the basics. You know, they've got a really good app that works, that notifies you about your flights, that tells you about other things that you can buy, should you wish to, but it's not a hard sell. You know, and as you said about the uniform, you know, they're continuing to innovate and respond. T5 is a joy to go through, not least thought because of shops. You know, so for an old-fashioned brand, I do think they do a really good job actually, and it's completely underplayed.
I agree, and they don't try and be. They're themselves even when innovating. So that, you know, I mean, I'm going on about the uniform, but it's still a British Airways uniform, but it's just been, you know, designed by a tailor, and it's innovating within the space that they know that they can own really well. Which I really like, and I like the comparison with insurance of it's insurance. It doesn't get away from that with protecting you and the risks to your business or you personally, but there's innovation within that. And you know, there's places to go with that. So I think we might be nearing the end of our chat through things, but I think it would be. There's a couple of questions kind of to finish off that I thought. Is there any advice that you would have given your younger self, thinking about where you are now, when you were 16, about to go off to university, which I can't believe I'm saying, because that seems so young.
I couldn't do anything else at 16. It wasn't because I was a prodigy. Literally, I Googled everything. You know, I didn't Google in those days, but I investigated everything. But going to university was the only thing I could really do. That was
your way to the UN.
Yes.
Which you got to in the end, sort of. But is there any advice that you would have given yourself?
I suppose just trust the process a little bit. You know, I think, you know, if I think back through my career, probably like everyone, you doubt yourself a little bit at certain points, probably that early to mid-career. And just, you know, trust it'll happen. You know, you need to put in the work, you need to stay focused, you need to stay alert and observe where you want to go, how you're going to get there and stuff. But just sort of trust the process a little bit more and don't doubt yourself. Yeah,
I think that's really valuable. If there was anyone that was trying to either get into a role as a CEO or a role within insurance, are there any professional tools or advice that people could start doing now to help with their career?
As I said earlier, I think LinkedIn is a great resource just to have a look at the type of roles, the type of industries. Because even if you look at the insurance industry, for example, you know, there are insurers, there are insurance brokers, there is insurtech. You know, there's all sorts of different, you know, bits of insurance that you can look to get into. So just do your research. Every industry, be it insurance or other industries, has got their own professional publications. So in insurance, there's the Insurance Times, there's the Insurance Age, etc. You know, put whatever you want, architect in front of that. You know, it's always the same. And read some of the stories, find out how the people got in, and just plot your own way.
I think I'd add that to say you don't need to know everything about insurance to start working in the industry. If you find a role that you really love the look of, whether that's in design or whether it's in you know, something financial, that there's a role there. And I think, what's the biggest takeaway you hope for listeners to get from this conversation? Is there anything we've missed that you want to make sure we get out there?
I suppose there's not one way into insurance, so you know, think wide. As I said, different flavors of insurance, and also different careers with insurance. You know, anything from, you know, research and insight to actuarial, if you're looking at the more traditional, to marketing, finance, etc. So don't limit your interpretation of what the insurance industry can do and does do. And I think once in, if you do decide to come into the insurance industry, just challenge the status quo. There's a lot of businesses that still need, like most industries, to be fair, not just insurance, but make your voice heard. And I think that would be my advice to younger people coming into any industry. Don't doubt yourself. Make your voice heard, because actually you've got a brilliant voice, you've got a brilliant mind, and you see things that people my age don't. So just make sure you're heard.
I think that's really valuable for people to hear, because it isn't a kind of set, structured industry where you can't shake things up if you want to. Has there been, just to finish, has there been an achievement personally or professionally of yours that you're really proud of? That it's a kind of
probably professionally, this role, I've been I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be able to lead Endsleigh. We've gone through a lot of change, and now we're focused back on sort of core competencies, but the change that we and I don't take credit for it, but as a team we have achieved, I just think it's a fantastic job turning around a business. And then personally, probably my little boy. So I've got one little boy, and had him a little bit later in life, so in my early 40s, and having a happy, healthy child. So, and being able to balance both, because you do need to make sacrifices, but you can actually balance both.
Yeah,
so,
that's good to hear as well, especially, and it sounds like you've got both things pretty good. That's good. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And but I'll have more stories of kind of people's different roles in insurance, and those stories that you were talking about people and things that have happened in insurance that it has helped impact across the world. We'll get more of those as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.